One moment. We're almost live to
Okay.
Facebook. Okay, starting that. And
all right. Thank you so much for joining us for this boycott meat roundtable. And we are streaming live on numerous different platforms across Facebook to bring you some very, very important news. So take it away, Joe Henry Enriquez. What is happening?
Well, we're out there. We're working with a number of different groups. Of course, we have 15 organizations and affiliate organizations in Europe, South America, Canada, Mexico, Africa, Asia, in our coalition for boycott meat. Last week, a civil rights lawsuit was filed through the USDA here, and we were part of that, Forward Latino, on issues regarding the multinational slaughterhouse corporations who have unfairly treated workers in their facilities in ways that harm them, that's dangerous to their health and welfare. So we filed this civil rights lawsuit with the USDA and asked for the Department of Justice to oversee this investigation. So that was filed last week. And of course, we have the boycott going on here in the US and across the world. We have many more people joining on board. There are also vigils that are happening across the country. So we are very thankful that not only people in the US, but across the world are very concerned about what's happening in the slaughterhouses here in our country and across the world, and realize the toxic nature of the work environment there in the slaughterhouses. So many things are being done.
Henry Enriquez, just to break it down, you filed a complaint saying that the way that certain slaughterhouses, the giant meatpacking companies operate, is racially biased because the people who are dying exposed to COVID-19, the slaughterhouse workers, the last time I checked, it was 95 of them, are almost exclusively, if not exclusively, I don't know, but they're overwhelmingly people of color, Black, Latino, Asian, people from 30 different countries, but they are not the white managers who are being given other benefits like work from home, et cetera. Is that the case?
It is correct. 87% of the workers in those facilities are Latinos, people of color, immigrants, whereas the office help, the management, are overwhelmingly white. So disproportionate treatment of the workers versus the management folks. And in management, not only do they have social distancing, but they're allowed to work from home, not in the toxic workplace that Latinos and other immigrants and people of color have to deal with on the shop floor. So this violates the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Article 6. These companies, Tyson and JBS, have received hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government to provide meat in the public sectors. And because of that, they are accountable to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Article 6. Clearly, they have broken that law. They should be held accountable, and that's what that lawsuit's all about. So we're asking for an investigation.
Dr. Milton Mills, we've got such a great panel. We'll get to everybody in a second, but what's your reaction to this charge that now they want the Justice Department to come in and investigate and possibly take action? And by the way, we invite any of these meatpacking plants, slaughterhouse owners, the big six on it anytime to respond. But what is your reaction, Dr. Milton Mills, to this complaint that it's actually racism because the people who are on the lines, the kill lines, dying, are overwhelmingly people of color, whereas the managers, according to this complaint, have special benefits that allow them to avoid COVID-19 to a large degree?
Well, my reaction is that I, number one, applaud them for filing this important and timely lawsuit. And beyond that, these meatpacking plants are killing their workers. I'm just going to put it out there. They're killing their workers through these inhuman, unsafe, inhumane work conditions. And once again, we see that within the United States, people of color are expendable. So I'm going to take this moment to say that, you know, we've seen lots and lots and lots of Black Lives Matter signs. Well, Hispanic lives, Asian lives, Native American lives all matter too. And my point is, it's time to move beyond just the sloganeering and the optics and actually put our literal money where our mouth is. And if we truly believe that these people, that their lives are important, that they have a right to safe and healthy working conditions, then we have to insist that these plants close until they can guarantee that kind of safety.
I want to bring in Carter Dillard. Carter Dillard is an attorney who is speaking for the Animal Legal Defense Fund, the premier animal protection legal agency in the United States. Carter, you also have some breaking news to tell us about.
We do. I mean, we've set up a hotline website for workers to report conditions, and especially conditions. Yep, reportanimalag.com.
You also have some breaking. Okay, anybody who has their phone on or any of the audio, turn it off. Sorry. Go ahead,
okay.
Carter.
That's okay. Yeah, we've got a website, reportanimalag.com, where workers can report on a variety of conditions, especially animal cruelty, but also conditions that are endangering workers, because this is an industry that is based on exploitation. Exploitation of workers, exploitation of animals, and it can't operate without sucking massive amounts of U.S. taxpayer money up and spitting it into these facilities that are really not sufficient and not sustainable. So this is a major opportunity for reform, and we've got a white paper called COVID-19 and Animals, Rethinking Our Relationship with Animals to Reduce the Likelihood of the Next Global Pandemic, that reports in detail on the connection between animal exploitation in a variety of scenarios and COVID-19 and the threat of the next pandemic. So I echo the comments of the prior speakers that this is a problem that's interrelated and based on exploitation.
Lisa Levinson of In Defense of Animals, one of the leading animal protection organizations in the United States. You have been also on the front lines, for example, taking a lead role in creating this coalition that is represented by some of the folks here, but there's like 40 groups that are a part of this now, and it's growing fast. What's your take on how we're starting to break news thanks to the work of Joe Enriquez Henry and Forward Latino and some of the other organizations that he's associated with?
Well, I think it's very exciting and it's long overdue. So it's wonderful to have all this data coming through and to be able to promote the safety of the workers in these plants. It's very important because their safety is at risk, and they already were working under really unsafe conditions, and to add the COVID-19 on top of it is just incredibly inhumane.
Yeah. Now, I would like to say this. As an organization that is involved in speaking up for animals, we often face this false accusation that somehow we don't care about people. I'm sure everybody here can relate to that accusation. Now, there is no way that people can say, well, yeah, I love your passion, but I care about people. People are dying in these slaughterhouses. People are getting sick and infecting their communities and their families in these slaughterhouses. Slaughterhouses, along with nursing homes and prisons, are the hotbeds of the coronavirus outbreak. And so when you're eating a chicken wing or a piece of bacon, don't you think, Dr. Milton Mills, that people who say, well, I'm a humanitarian, and there's a million other reasons why going plant-based, for example, is better for the entirety of humanity, to end world hunger, to reverse climate change, to stop water pollution, and all sorts of other horrors that are going on. But we have a clear-cut case now that people who are marching into these slaughterhouses that are riddled with COVID-19 could literally die so that somebody can feel entitled to eat a chicken wing or a slice of bacon, Dr. Mills.
No, you're absolutely right. And going to work should not have to be a death sentence. People should not have to feel that they have to put their life at stake to earn a living. And again, you know, we've heard a lot about white privilege with respect to the Black Lives Matter movement, but this is a case of privilege that cuts across all ethnic and racial lines. And no one has the right or can assume the privilege of saying, well, I just want my meat, knowing that that means that somebody is going to get sick and somebody else is going to die. That is horrific, it is inexcusable, and it has to stop.
So what can we do in that regard? Because let's face it, the news media, they have started to talk about the situation in slaughterhouses because people are dying, but they still have a tendency to describe these workers as essential workers. And of course, if the product is not essential, which meat is not, millions of people live statistically healthier lives without eating animals than the workers who are making that product or processing those animals are not essential. And yet the Trump administration, using the Defense Protection Act, has declared meat slaughterhouses as critical infrastructure, which robs a lot of these workers their legal rights, frees the companies from certain types of liabilities, and essentially pushes them toward going to work, even though it could kill them. Carter, as an attorney, what are your thoughts on that aspect of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's an industry that requires subsidies to continue, and we have to remember that it's exploitative in the sense of trying to minimize labor costs. That's how the whole thing was built, that they would mechanize the raising and slaughter of animals by minimizing labor costs, which hurts workers and obviously hurts the animals. So I think at base, targeting those subsidies, and we saw at least 9.5 million, depending on how you count it, it could have been 27 million in the CARES Act, used to pump up the industry when in reality, you know, given the goals of the boycott, most of these plants should not be operating because they can't be operating safely. So I think if you wanted to target the foundational issue, it's the fact that it's an industry that requires these subsidies to maintain itself, can't operate in a way that's not exploiting workers and animals, and you know, at the state law level, can't operate without being exempt from animal cruelty laws. And I'll again echo the other speakers' comments that I think it is a good old boys network. It's certainly that case with the Farm Bureau and all of the state capitals and massive ag companies that have a lot of sway in Congress. So in the end, the foundation of the problem is money and probably a lot of race relations that come with that power imbalance.
Wow.
Jane, just a very quick comment. I want to affirm everything that Carter just said, but to also point out that these slaughterhouses exploit the public because they rely on the public's ignorance of what actually goes on in those slaughterhouses, how dangerous their products are, and how unhealthy they are in order to remain in business. So they are exploitive all the way around.
Absolutely. And let me ask this question. Joe Henry Enriquez, what's next? So you have filed a complaint saying that there is racial discrimination in the slaughterhouses. If I boiled it all down, and by the way, we invite any slaughterhouse company on at any time. If I boiled it on down, you're saying basically the Black, Latino, Asian workers have to go in there and and sweat in there. Even if they have PPE, they're sweating onto the food. They're still getting sick. It's very hard, if not impossible, to create a safe environment within slaughterhouses, which are all based on processing lines. And that the upper management, or the management, which is, you're saying generally, correct me if I'm wrong, generally white, is exempt from that, and that special considerations are given to them so that they can avoid getting COVID-19. So what's the next step? You call for a Department of Justice investigation. Has the Department of Justice responded to you?
They have not. This just started last week. The briefs have been filed. So basically what's happening now is the USDA, Department of Agriculture, is reviewing the complaint that has been filed by our coalition. Really, all that we have to do regarding this complaint, and I'm sure that the attorney on this call will be able to acknowledge this, we don't have to prove anything other than to show the statistics of the proportion of workers who are people of color and immigrants, to show that they are the majority and they are being treated differently than the white workforce in management. That's all we have to show. So what's going to happen next is the head of the Department of Agriculture is going to have to meet with us to work out some form of agreement. And of course, what we're going to call for is 6-foot social distancing between workers. We were receiving videos over the weekend showing workers in the plant still next to each other within feet, within inches of each other, going into the plant, into the work area. And clearly, and JBS has acknowledged the fact that they're not going to be able to attain the social distancing. And that is totally wrong, unconscionable. Also on Friday, over 200 workers walked out of a JBS facility in Greeley, Colorado, to protest the unsafe working conditions at that facility in Greeley. So we're seeing— I
want to show a picture of this woman. Without naming names, can you describe, we don't need to get into corporate names, where she works and what happened?
This individual here is a slaughterhouse worker, and she was not forewarned about the virus in her work area. There was no mandatory testing. She did get infected, and she went into a hospital, ended up on the ventilator. She was there for many, many weeks. We still need to get an update of how she is doing, but she was next to dying. She was a number of workers from her facility who have died due to the lack of protection, mandatory testing, the lack of 6 feet social distancing.
All right, and I also go ahead.
One more comment.
Yes, of course.
In the hospital, when we treat COVID patients, obviously, when you're treating a patient, you can't distance. But what we have is full body PPE. And in cases where these slaughterhouses are not able to provide appropriate social distancing for their employees, they must supply them with full body PPE to keep them protected.
However, let me say this, that looking at the photos when they are wearing all of that, which is like a spacesuit with a face mask, and often they have glasses of their own, they are sweating.
Yes, so, it is very, very uncomfortable. There's nowhere around that. Yeah.
But I'm asking you, Dr. Mills, what are the health threats of people who could be infected with COVID-19 sweating onto meat?
Well, I mean, again, I'm going to express my opinion about this. The theory is that COVID-19 originated in wild animals and jumped to humans by humans eating animals. We know that we all practice contactless delivery of items because of the risk that a delivery person handling a particular package might be COVID positive and could transfer that to the package. Well, if you've got these slaughterhouses and meat plants that are just filled with people who are COVID positive and in various stages of the illness, it is a very real possibility that the meat products that come out of those plants could be contaminated. So the bottom line is that it's clearly not healthy. I think the best avenue is to shut down the plants for the time being.
Well, what's the chance of that happening? And let me take that to Carter Dillard. I mean, you know, half measures sometimes avail us nothing. This situation we saw just generally in the United States, taking half measures and saying, yeah, it'll be fine, it'll go away. Magical thinking is what that's called. Now we're back where we started. It reminds me of a kid who does a whole year in school but doesn't do very well and has to repeat a grade. We're back where we were in April, and this is experts saying it. So doesn't the same apply to slaughterhouses? I mean, if there's no way to truly, just like restaurants, now the governor said, let's close the bars and the indoor restaurants. If California's governor, if there's no really good way to have, people on a line killing 10,000 pigs a day in some giant kill factory, wouldn't the only really sensible answer is shut them down, Carter?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they should have, if they didn't have the undemocratic influence that they have over public officials, I think they would have been some of the first places to be shut down, given the broad scope of the threat that they pose. So I don't know how feasible it is, but I certainly agree with the idea that they should be. And not only because of the sort of threats that we've already discussed, but there are additional threats. Their depopulation, in which they're killing millions of animals because of the dysfunction of the facility, itself poses a massive public health threat. The way that they're administering drugs to the animals, but now they're in a completely different operational phase, poses an additional public health threat. And of course, as we know, the greatest threat, the greatest way to exacerbate the threat of the next pandemic is through the climate crisis. And factory farms and slaughterhouses are part of a giant network that's exacerbating that through their emissions. So for a dozen reasons, I think that these should be priority targets for the sort of shutdown that the other speakers have suggested.
Well, of course, the big issue, Lisa Levinson, is, well, we don't talk politics in terms of, elections. We can talk, basically, this is a political issue in the sense that it's about political will. And that gets back to consumers. The biggest power in this entire thing, even though the government is propping up the dairy industry, and I believe it's one of the reasons why there's a big drumbeat now to get kids back to school, because that's where they can force feed them cow's milk, which is being rejected by consumers increasingly. And that's one of the reasons why the dairy industry is in spiral, is because these kids are not in school being forced to drink the breast milk of another species that is not good for them, and to whom many of them are allergic to it, if not most. So it's really about politics, but behind politics, it's the consumers. If the consumers rose up and said, we're not going to spend our dollars on these products, meat and dairy products, because of a vast majority, just a slew of reasons, because heart disease is the other leading killer in the United States. 1 out of every 4 people dies. Aside from the COVID crisis, that's caused by arteries getting clogged with meat-laden cholesterol. You've got processed meat being cancer-causing. You've got the potential of getting COVID-19 if you work at a slaughterhouse. You've got climate change. You've got world hunger, which is exacerbated, if not outright caused, by animal agriculture, because animals are eating most of the food on the planet, because we're only 7.8 billion humans killing 70 billion animals a year, land animals. So that's why I think, Lisa, the boycott meat thing is so essential.
Yes, exactly. We agree. And that is why our Interfaith Vegan Coalition is fully behind this boycott. We represent different traditions from all across the globe who are all equally incensed that this cruelty and inhumanity is going on to people and to animals. And so we've banded together as our coalition, and we've all supported this boycott meat initiative.
Yeah, and here's just a list of some of the other diseases that stem from our abuse of animals: mad cow disease, swine flu, SARS, bird flu, MERS. And I wanted to ask you, Dr. Mills, there is now a new strain of swine flu that has erupted in China, and it is infecting the people who work in the pig farms, but it's also spreading out in certain provinces to the general population.
Yeah, let me just make a quick comment about these half measures that are really ineffective when trying to control a epidemic or pandemic like either COVID or swine flu or whatever. Half measures are the equivalent of peeing in the corner of a pool. It does not work. And so it is only a matter of time until, if that infection is not checked, until it gets into the general population and starts to spread around the world. We have got to understand that eating other animals is one of the most dangerous and unhealthy things that we can do as human beings. It is not necessary, and we can change our diet and improve not only our health, but the ecology of the world, and certainly the lives of the animals who are abused and mistreated.
You are watching the Boycott Meat Roundtable, which is going to occur and is occurring every Monday afternoon, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, here, facebook.com/Jane Velez Mitchell, Jane Unchained Facebook, and cross-posted to many other organizations' pages. If you'd like to join the meat boycott, go to boycottmeat.com and you can sign up to get information. I want to bring up another piece of breaking news, and that is, let me get the exact photo here of the headline. Joaquin Phoenix urges slaughterhouse workers to report abuse of either animals or people. What do you make of that, Joe?
Well, that we applaud that, and I think out during the same time that the walkout occurred by slaughterhouse workers in Colorado. So workers are very concerned. They're seeing their communities rise in the infection rate. Clearly, we're putting out the information, trying to help workers. Many different coalition members who are not only a part of our coalition, but other coalitions, helping inform workers of their rights to report illnesses, their rights in the workplace, what they need to do. So many things are going on right now. So we're very thankful for the different groups that are happening out there. And of course, with BLM is really kind of encouraged a lot of other social justice groups to get out there and speak up.
So Carter Dillard, let me ask you, legally, what's the next step? I mean, it's one thing to urge Congress to do the right thing. Good luck with that, you know? I mean, we all know that members of Congress are like this with the meat and dairy industry. We know that a lot of agencies of government like the USDA and the BLM are pretty much, the Bureau of Land Management is what I'm referring to, are pretty much run by the cattle industry, the meat and dairy industry. We know that when there was a breaking news story, some shooting that occurred, and it was at a baseball park in DC area, it just so happened that a baseball game was going on between members of Congress and the meat and dairy industry. What a shock. So I don't know that appealing to the better nature of members of Congress is worth the time of day. What can be done to leverage this slaughterhouse COVID-19 crisis, which is on the news, to make them deal with it and to either shut down the slaughterhouses or doing something close to that?
Yeah, I think really 3 steps. One is it requires transparency. So workers coming forward, and again, it's reportanimalag.com. Workers coming forward, telling their stories, exposing what's happening to the animals, and keeping as much transparency about what's going on as possible is one step. Secondly, litigation. the kind of thing that Joe's engaged in. Lots of other groups are considering litigation. People are taking a really close look at the billions of dollars that went out to factory farmers and whether or not that money was accounted for properly. That sort of litigation can be very effective. Groups are considering different ways to bring cruelty cases based on the way that conditions are much worse now because of COVID-19. And thirdly, I don't think we can give up on the system entirely, but I do think at the state level, there's perhaps more that can be done, at least until things change in Washington, using a lot of the growing...
Sorry.
That's all right. Using growing plant-based producers and the increased market that they have as competitors, using them as leverage at the state level to encourage legislatures to support transition to plant-based foods. I mean, these are businesses that are competing at an unfair playing field with big ag, and using the businesses that are succeeding in creating healthy food and not creating pandemics, using them as a toehold for state legislatures can be successful. So those are three possibilities.
Well, one of the things that I think we really need to do is start promoting the whole idea that if you eat a Beyond Burger or an Impossible Burger, you are eating a product that has not touched human hands. Okay, that's automated system. Now, I've read articles that say that meat processors, killers of animals, are racing to create an automated system. Well, that's going to take a long time. What they should be doing is racing to create a plant-based system. The idea that they're still investing when they know better. I mean, let's just take two of the biggest meat processors in the world, JBS, which just our attorney, contributor and anchor, Carissa Crines, who runs BVeg certification, just certified their whole product line is vegan. JBS, one of the biggest, if not the biggest slaughter company in the world, has a vegan product line that people say when they eat the burgers, they cannot tell the difference. It's that meaty. And yet, what's stopping them from switching over if they know enough to create an entire product line, if they know enough to actually go to BVeg certification and get certified? They're a big vegan company that also kills animals. Dr. Mills, what are your thoughts on that? We also know that Tyson invested in Beyond Meat and then pulled out because the reports are that they wanted to create their own meatless line. And in fact, that one of the top executives of Tyson has said the future of food is meatless. So they know. And yet, what is the response of this industry to create robotic slaughterhouses where these animals now are going to be slaughtered by machines instead of people?
Let me say, in the interest of transparency, that I actually visited a slaughterhouse about 30 years ago and saw firsthand what goes on in the dismemberment of cows and bulls and so forth, and it was just a emotionally shattering experience, which at the time I hadn't been sort of had my consciousness raised about animal rights. So that aspect of it came as a surprise to me, but I'm really glad I went. The idea of trying to slaughter animals with robots is hideous because we all know that means that these animals are going to be horribly mangled, abused, and treated even worse. So I just don't see this as being viable. And as far as companies like Tyson's getting involved in the plant-based meat industry, on the one hand, people say, well, it's great because that means that, there's going to be more plant-based products and more people will use it. But, last year, Tyson's had to recall chicken because it had shards of metal in it. And if they manage to put something as foreign as metal shards into a living animal's muscle, I have absolutely no faith that they are going to produce a plant-based burger that is trustworthy. Last comment I got to make, let's not forget the hidden racism involved in these meat plants. And what I mean by that is every time there's a raid on one of these plants, it turns out that a lot of the workers are in a category that is considered undocumented. But they do that on purpose. And the reason is that they know that when they have workers who are not documented, that they tend to complain less, put up with more onerous conditions, and they're easier to control. So I just want to make the point that this BS about legality is really about exploitation. It's about the ability to exploit people who are vulnerable and can't complain like other workers.
I would just like to give the last word to Joe Enriquez Henry, who is the reason we have this Boycott Meat Coalition. Tell us a little bit about you. You're in Iowa, the capital of meat in America. One of the reasons why people don't rise up against the meat industry when they're running for political office is that the caucus in Iowa, the caucuses are one of the first hurdles that they have to pass. So what do you see happening? Do you see that this Boycott Meat Coalition initiative, with all the other actions that you're taking, the racial discrimination complaint, are they effective?
Yes, it is effective. And other groups are forming right now. Tomorrow, another coalition is forming with farmers, with livestock farmers. And their coalition is going to be called Boycott Big Meat. So there is a lot of awareness happening, and not only in Iowa, Jane, but across the country. We're communicating through our coalition with workers at facilities in Washington State, Colorado, Arizona, Kansas, Nebraska. So many people are aware about this. They're aware about this because of the virus. The virus is educating people about the danger of working conditions and how animals play a part in this, and how we need to fight the exploitation of workers, of animals, and protect the environment. So a lot of stuff is going on right now. Different groups are getting involved. They realize that meat is not essential. Workers are essential. Communities are essential. We need to protect our environment. Animals, the cruelty to animals, the slaughtering of animals are impacting many different fronts. So that's why we also have environmentalists involved, again, worker activists, social activists, many vegans, animal rights groups. So it's growing. And again, with Iowa, we're kind of at ground central here, but we're hearing about all these issues throughout the Midwest where many of these meatpacking plants are located. So lots is going on.
I want to thank everybody, heroes all. Carter Dillard, thank you so much for joining us. Lisa Levinson, relentless pursuer for justice for animals, people, and the planet. Dr. Mills, America's favorite doc who tells it like it is. I thank you so much. And of course, Joe Enriquez Henry, who is the leader of this Boycott Meat Coalition, who is working on this issue from ground zero, from Iowa. He is just heroically speaking truth to power. I love all of you. Thank you so much. Please join us. Share this out, people. Go to Boycott Meat, sign up. Also, the other, Carter, tell us one more time what the other website is.
Just reportanimalag.com. Thank you, Jane.
Reportanimalag.com. Thank you, Animal Legal Defense Fund, for all you do. We'll see you next week here, Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, for another Boycott Meat Roundtable, where we will definitely have more breaking news. Share it out. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.